Ladies and gentlemen, all my honourable opponent has done is reveal the depths of his own historical ignorance in a massive distortion of what is the record of World War I. I'm going to have 2 points for you today. First of all, how this is it, all his things are a distortion of what actually happened, and how World War I was indeed a just war. As his case is predicated on World War I being some form of pointless slaughter, his case is massively falls down on this. And secondly, how we feel that the second point is, since we feel that touring this war was a just war, with universal feelings of horror, can discourage future intervention, which we feel are ultimately a good thing in many cases. But first, on to my rebuttal. Okay, this idea that we will simply boost militant nationalism. How is commemoration of human dignity in the face of war, promotion of militant nationalism? How is commemoration of the Christmas truce, one of the positive experiences of war, a positive experience of common humanity, how is that a nationalist symbol? It is a symbol of the brotherhood of man, even when it is someone storming the trench and dying for his comrades. How is that a nationalist symbol? They were dying for each other, they were dying together, and they died for their friends. How is this a nationalist symbol? It is a symbol of humanity. Okay. Also this idea, they appear to have had this bizarre idea that we're going to portray it entirely in positive terms. No, we will accept the horror of war. We will accept the people who died of trench foot. We will accept the people who coughed out their lungs covered in gas. But to deny other things which happened is fundamentally false. Okay, and he claimed that, they'll just remember the happy stories. Could he please explain the popularity of the war poets then, whose poetry is some of the most powerful messages against the horrors of World War I. And finally, this idea that the violence was somehow coercive and they made no free choice. Firstly, could he please explain this statement, considering that the biggest volunteer armies in history were during World War I, and furthermore, he's going to claim, it was just nationalist lying. No, in my first point, I am going to prove to you why Britain did indeed have a just stake in this war. Okay, so why did Britain have a just stake in this war? I would like to read you a quote from the introduction of Wilfred Owen's poetry. I hope that my poems outlast Prussian militarism. Wilfred Owen, a poet who showed the horrors of war, acknowledged the horrors of German militarism as well. And also, furthermore, he feels that he is completely ignoring the wider historical picture. For Eastern Europe, World War I does not mean horror, it means national liberation. And finally, why it was a war of necessity. Britain's interests and the interests of the British people were threatened by German nationalism. German nationalism had systematically destabilised the continent. German nationalism systematically made it impossible to operate in a peaceful world. I would like to tell you the ideas of how Germany planned to treat France after World War I. It planned to completely annex Belgium, it planned to annex Normandy, it planned to make large areas of France a satellite state, and enforce some form of ridiculous indemnity. And then make all of Eastern Europe slave states as well, in a form of economic serfdom to Germany. So clearly we can see that there were many, many reasons to intervene against a hegemonic militarist power. So his claim that World War I was simply pointlessness does not stand. Yes?
Why do you think so many thousands signed up to join the army?
Quite simply because their governments told them so, but I feel that their governments were correct in telling them so in the case of the UK, and it is the UK thing I've told you. Could you please tell me how the horrors of various sort of like plans of the German things were conducive to a happy, stable society in the future? Okay, so having proved that it was indeed a war of necessity for many people, and that to claim otherwise is a distortion of the historical record, I will talk about how tarring this war as unjust discourages other interventions, and how we feel this is ultimately bad. Okay, so basically, as I said, we are acknowledging the sacrifice, we are acknowledging the suffering. However, we also feel that we need to acknowledge the reasons. And if we do not acknowledge the reasons, if we simply paint sacrifice for a justified cause as entirely futile, what does this tell us? This tells us that war is entirely futile. This tells us that there is no reason to ever interfere in international affairs of other countries. We feel that this is fundamentally false. We feel that to a certain extent, the public must be publicly, we must be prepared to brace ourselves for the idea that intervention is sometimes justified in the face of horror. I would point you towards the time when the world stood by in the looking at the Rwandan genocide, but I would also point you to times when the world intervened and stopped horror. I would point you towards the Gulf War. I would point you towards Yugoslavia. I would point you towards Sierra Leone. And we feel that ultimately, by claiming that all war is futile, by claiming that a war which was justified in the face of blatant aggression, in the face of radical militarism for a country, to claim this is unjustified, what happens then? It tells you that in no cases should we intervene, that the world may burn, but in the end, we must not go to war. We feel that this is fundamentally bad. First of all, we feel that it fundamentally harms the people who are harms the people who suffer from the militaristic aggression of the various powers, who we do not subsequently intervene against. And as the UK is one of the big international peacekeepers with one of the biggest armies in the world, this is particularly bad. We ultimately feel that it harms us as well. We feel it contributes to a less stable geopolitical order. We feel it leads to more, we feel that war leads to more disease, more radicalism, more terrorism, more economic upset, every form. So we feel that in this case, it just encourages a laissez-faire attitude to geopolitics, which just spawns further ills for our country. So for the reasons that I've told you for the day, for the reasons that he would distort the historical record in the service of a lie, and for the reasons that this lie would ultimately harm not just us, but the people of the world, I urge you, I beg you to vote for the opposition. Thank you.